it's 4 o'clock, so I guess we can get started. We're gonna hop right in because we have a lot of stuff to cover today. If you guys just want to stay on mute for now, and then we'll kind of take questions in the chat box at the end. And feel free to ask questions or make comments as we're going along here. If you guys have absolutely any questions or things you want to say, like if you have any other tips, feel free to add those in there and we'll just get started. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Sarah, and I'm a photographer at CCV. I do project management and some video producing amongst a lot of other weird things on the media team. And I get to do some photography, which is really fun. And I do freelance photography on the side. I do lifestyle and weddings, and yeah, that's pretty much it. How about you, Quincy?
Yeah, my name's Quincy. I volunteer with CCV Music, so mostly just around the worship bands all the time and capturing content for them. And then on the side, I do concerts mostly and festivals and work with a lot of artists, and then as well also do portraits for people when they need them.
Awesome. Cool. So we're going to get started. I'm going to kind of hop in and talk about a few like basic principles, and then Quincy and I are going to go in and share our screens. We're going to show you guys some of our work and just kind of talk about the principles that we've already spoken about and how you can see those things practically within a picture. If you guys are just hopping in, hi, welcome. We just got started. Cool. So I'm going to start with gear. So I think that's my computer. Sorry. Let me turn my sound off. There we go. Can you guys still hear me? Yeah, okay, cool. So I'm gonna start with gear. So if you have a DSLR camera, like a Canon Rebel, or I don't know what the entry level for Nikon is, or a Fuji camera, where you can take the lens off and put a new lens on, that is awesome. But if you don't, and you have a phone, you guys can stick around. Pretty much all the principles that we're gonna cover, you can apply to your smartphone photography as well, or even if you have a Polaroid or a point and shoot, anything like that, you don't need a fancy camera to learn how to start shooting. I actually wish that I would have paid more attention to taking good photos on my phone before I picked up a fancy camera, just because if you're more mindful of those things going into it, then you're going to be good to go once you pick up a camera. Obviously, there's a lot of technical things that you have to figure out. But if you start, just applying these principles and learning how to edit just on your phone, you're going to be set for success if photography is something that you're interested in. And then once you are able to save up and pay for a more expensive camera, then you'll be ready to go. Cool. So we're going to cover manual exposure first. And what I want to talk about with manual exposure, if you guys are not using manual exposure, I would encourage you to start doing manual exposure. And so what that is if you have a camera like a DSLR, you're going to move the little dial at the top, or I think on some cameras it's on the side, to the M. It's like a little letter M on most cameras. And that's going to be your manual settings. And then when you go in on the back of your camera, you're going to be able to adjust those. If you have a phone, a lot of newer phones have the option for manual camera settings. And if they don't, I'm not sure about the iPhones. I know my husband has like a newer Android and his does. My iPhone 8 doesn't have it, but I do know that you can download apps on your phone that allow you to do manual exposure. And I feel like if you can get the principles of the mechanics of manual exposure down on your phone, that's going to help you a lot, especially if you move into using like a more advanced camera, because manual exposure and manual focus are like some of the more tricky things in camera to master, especially as you move into like different lighting scenarios and stuff like that. So I'm going to share with you guys a little, I don't have it pulled up. I'm going to pull this up. Sorry, let me move this little bar down. Okay, cool. So I'm going to share with you guys a graph that's just going to kind of help us out with understanding manual exposure. So this is actually something that Zach Durr, one of my peers, showed me when I was first getting started. And the first thing that you're going to want to think about when you're thinking about manual exposure is your aperture. And so the way to understand aperture is you want to think about aperture within your lens, or some people will call this the f-stop. You can see that there's an F right here before the number. And the aperture is essentially, if you think about it like a pupil, like the pupil of your eye, if you go to a doctor and you get your pupils dilated, they're really wide open and they're gonna let in a lot of light, right? So if you go to your doctor, you get your eyes dilated, what do? You're probably wearing sunglasses afterwards because the light's really blinding, maybe everything looks a little blurry. So the things that you're gonna experience, you can see on this chart, is that when you're at a really high aperture, that actually means that the pupil is closed even tighter. And if you're at a low number, it's going to be opened wider. And so it's going to be letting more light in to the camera. So the things that you're going to experience when you're at a lower aperture, as you can see in this image, and we'll include this whenever we post this to YouTube later, so you guys can look at this and save it as a little cheat sheet on your phone. I'd definitely recommend doing that. It was something that I did when I was first starting. But when you're at a lower aperture, you're gonna notice that you have kind of what we call like a greater depth of field, where the background's super blurred and your front subject or the thing that you're taking a picture of is in like really sharp focus. And that's something that you might notice if, for example, you're taking a picture on your phone in portrait mode. It'll give you that kind of similar effect that you see in all those Pinterest photos where there's like all these like glittery lights and everything's blurry in the background. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So a lot of photographers like to shoot at a low aperture. I'm one of those photographers. I think it looks really nice, but there are times where you're gonna wanna shoot at a higher aperture. For example, if you want, and I'm gonna show you guys a picture that'll just kind of help you see this. If you want something that to like kind of capture some texture on the skin for a certain like stylistic look, if you're taking a picture of a person, or for example, if you're taking a picture of landscape and you really want that background to be in sharp focus, you don't like, say if you're taking a picture of a person like in Sedona, but you want to see the texture and the rocks behind them, then you might want to change your camera setting to be at a higher number for your f-stop. And so that'll give you less of that depth of field, but more focus overall. And this is something a lot of people will also do. They'll kind of do what we call stop down or do a higher aperture if you're taking like a big group of people, like a family photo. So the next part of this kind of like exposure triangle here is the shutter speed. And so the shutter speed, you want to think about this essentially almost like blinking if you're thinking about your eyes. So the shutter speed is actually part of like the sensor in your camera. So if you take the lens off and you look inside, there's like a little box in there, and it's basically how fast it like opens and closes. So if you, for example, if you're at like a really high shutter speed, that's going to be like really fast. So think about it like the lens, or the camera will open and close really fast. Like when you hear that sound, that's the shutter when you use your camera. If you're on your phone camera, you might not hear that, but if you have your sound off, but it's the same concept. If you are shooting on manual on your phone, your higher shutter speed is going to be opening really fast and then closing really fast. And that is going to be letting in less light because the amount of time that it's being exposed to the light is a lot faster. So when you slow that down and you go to a lower number, this is going to mean that you get maybe some motion blur because it's open for a really long time, but you're going to be letting a lot of light in. So if you've ever seen a picture that has maybe like a really blurred background, but not in the way that like aperture would be, say that someone's standing like in front of the train and you see motion blur behind them, that photographer was probably shooting at a really low shutter speed, and they just told the person they were taking a picture of to stand super, super still, and they might have been on a tripod even or something like that to make sure that you're not getting any of that blur on the subject. So that's kind of what that is. I know that I'm moving pretty fast, but again, we'll leave this for you guys later. This is something that's just going to take practice, but it is important for us to learn. So then the third part of that is going to be our ISO. So our ISO is essentially how sensitive your camera is to the light. And as you move to a higher ISO, what you're going to notice is a lot of cameras, especially like mirrored cameras, like your Canon Rebel or your entry level Nikon are going to have a harder time with the ISO adding what we call grain to a photo. And I'm going to actually show you guys an image I took with my camera in very dark conditions so you guys can see what I mean about this. But this is going to mean that, you know, if you bump your ISO up, you're going to be able to have more sensitivity to the light, get a brighter image, but you might be dealing with some grain. So I would say most photographers, we try to keep our ISO as low as possible. And then if you need to, you can go a little bit lower with your shutter speed. And I would say most of us in most conditions like to shoot at a low aperture. And so that'll mean you're letting in the most amount of light with the least amount of motion blur and the least amount of grain. So I hope that makes sense. And we'll show you guys a couple of examples of that. And if you guys have questions later on, again, feel free to leave those in the chat as you're thinking about them. But these are kind of like the fundamental principles of what we call the exposure triangle. So there's 3 parts of exposure when you're shooting manual. Cool. I'm gonna stop sharing this. Great. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys a couple of photos that I've taken. The first one I'm gonna share with you guys is that photo I was talking about that was really dark. So this one, there we go, is a photo that I took when we were on a mission trip. My husband and I were on a mission trip in El Salvador, and we went to go pray for different people in their homes, and this man was super sick. And so I was dealing kind of with a couple of issues taking this photo that I was trying really hard to be super discreet, because obviously this was like a super sacred moment and I wanted to be very mindful of that. So I probably only took 4 pictures because I wanted to make sure that I was staying out of the way and not being a distraction. And so I really had to make sure I was getting my settings right. So I'll show you guys right here. You can see that my ISO was at 3200. So this was a really dark room, and I'll actually show you guys the original image. So this was the original image. It was super dark in there. It was so dark that I was standing like right outside the door and I could hardly even see inside when I was looking through my camera to see what was happening. And so I was really nervous that these pictures were not going to turn out, but I'm so grateful that they did, because this is like such a cool moment. And so I captured it at a pretty high ISO at 3200. I usually don't go much higher than that. Usually I'm at about like 24 or 32 if I'm in dark conditions. And then I shot it at f2.8 because I was on a 24-70 lens. So that's the aperture. 2.8. I was on a 24-70 lens because that was the only lens I wanted to bring with me on this trip. And that's the lowest that one can go. And then I was shooting at 1/100th of a second for shutter speed. So you can tell my shutter speed was really low because I was trying to let that light in. And let me just show you guys, I'm gonna zoom in on the image so you can see what I'm talking about with the grain. And when I edited this, let me look at the history. When I edited this, you can see that I like added some luminance, and that can kind of help take away some of that grain. And let me go ahead and take that off. If we go like right here, there we go. So you can see this was like a really grainy image because of the high ISO, and also because it was dark, and then I had to up the exposure a lot and whenever I was editing this. And so that's just kind of an example of that. Like I said, there are some fixes to grain, but once you have too much of it, it's kind of hard to go back. But again, you do what you can with the lighting conditions that you have, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about next is lighting. So I kind of have an maybe unpopular belief among some photographers that there's not really any such thing as bad light. And a lot of photographers will teach that you only want to shoot in these certain conditions. But I think that if you get to a place where you really know how to use your camera settings, that you know how to like work light and angles, especially if you're posing a person, or even like if you're taking product photography of, you know, certain items, that you really can work with any kind of light, and it all just depends on your creative vision. So, you know, a lot of people are kind of accustomed to what I call flattering light, which is what most photographers preach, which is like in the shade, or at like sunset or sunrise, what you hear people call like the golden hour. That's kind of what they're talking about then, is like an hour or so, 45 minutes before sunset, and then hitting sunset, or that sunrise time. And, you know, which is like just at sunrise and a little bit afterwards. And those are definitely really flattering light. And I would say if someone asks you to take, you know, their senior pictures or their, you know, engagement pictures, maybe, you are going to want to probably shoot them in what we call flattering light, because they're going to be expecting that. They're going to expect those Pinterest worthy pictures. And so you're going to want to edit and shoot in a way that's, you know, really flattering to them. You can still have your own style. But as far as like creative photography goes, and, you know, like editorial photography, which is what we call photos that are like in a magazine or in a lot of print, or even on like fashion blogs and stuff like that, you really have a lot of options. So I'm going to show you guys a couple of photos that I took and talk about the different lighting conditions I took them in and kind of why I made some of the choices that I made, and then Quincy's going to do the same. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. Cool. Thanks for bearing with me, you guys. Move this little bar around. Okay. So this first image is one that I took for Tribe Wars, which I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you've been to camp, have seen these, which was really cool. Brent like made a cool design out of them and printed them. I was like totally freaking out about it because I don't know, it's really awesome to like see your stuff in print. And yeah, we had a lot of fun with this. So this concept kind of started with, we wanted like a Mad Max kind of vibe. If any of you guys have ever seen that movie, it's a little crazy. So some of you might not have seen it. But we wanted like a Mad Max kind of vibe. And the whole concept was very like dystopian and grungy and gritty. So we really wanted that feel with everything. And so these were actually taken at a place called the Casa Grande Domes, which is also where we filmed the whole video series for like promoting Tribe Wars and that we showed at camps. And I wanted the edits and the images to really reflect what was going to be happening in the video and the video edits, as far as like the color and the light and all that kind of stuff. So we were shooting in like very harsh light. It was actually probably like 105 degrees out. It was really hot. Everyone was wearing a bunch of layers and sweating a ton. We had a makeup artist come and do like all this awesome craziness. But I didn't really care that the light wasn't flattering because I wanted that really grungy image. So you'll see like most of these images I did take kind of like backlit just to avoid any major shadows on the face. There were a couple where I like played with shadows on the face, but for the most part, I did it backlit. And then I edited in like a very contrasty and then like kind of brought up the aqua tones and stuff like that. So this is an example of what we would call a harsh light image. And this is something that a lot of photographers are scared of, but something that I would encourage you, if you're already comfortable, especially shooting in manual in flattering light, try out harsh light. Get out at like noon in the summer and try some crazy stuff because it's a lot of fun. The second image I'm going to show you guys is one that my husband took for me, but I got all the settings dialed in and I was like, this is what I want, and I'm gonna go sit right there. I like made him pose, and then I was like, this is what I want, but me. And this was at dusk. I like dusk or blue hour. Some photographers call it blue hour. Is like one of my favorite times to shoot because you can do so much cool stuff with like silhouetting and yeah. So that's like another fun time to shoot. And then this one is in flattering light. This is a senior picture at sunrise, and we also have a lot of clouds. So I know a lot of photographers love shooting in clouds. I have like mixed feelings about it. I like it, it's fine. But I think everyone has this misconception that like cloudy light is always flattering. And it can be tricky because if the sun's like behind them, it actually can cause some like shadows underneath their eyes. So you just have to be careful about the way you're positioning people. But this session was a lot of fun. And then this one is actually in shade. So this is at the baptistry. The baptistry at Peoria is really nice because it's almost always shady, which is great because you always know you're going to get a good picture and it has a nice backdrop and everything. So I really like this image. Again, when you're shooting with shade, there's some things you want to think about. If you're already comfortable with manual exposure, you might want to try dipping your toe into some like manual white balance settings, because I think I took this one on auto probably, which was a mistake because it was like very cool tone. Let me show you the original image. It's like super cool tone. So I had to like warm this up quite a bit. You can see over here, which is fine. Like there's a lot of things you can correct. It's the beauty of digital photography is you have a lot of freedom to correct stuff later. So, you know, don't be afraid to shoot something wrong, especially if you're at a place where most of you guys probably are, if you're not, you know, doing this professionally full time, like just have fun and learn stuff. Oh, I'm also going to show you guys, I want to show you guys the original of this one. So you can see there's like a really stark contrast. I don't usually edit this stylized, but it was kind of what we were going for. But it was a lot of fun. I love doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can see like the sky is almost a little blown out, all that kind of stuff. Very harsh light that day. Cool. This one's from Easter sunrise service. I really love this picture. I love when you like see a really cool moment of like worship and you get to capture that. It's like one of my favorite things to capture. And this one was a little bit tricky because we had like some mixed shadows and highlights here. But at the end of the day, if you're experiencing that, you can just take a little brush or a little like radial filter and just pop in there and fix that. This one I really love. This was from a series that we did called Snitch. And I actually popped this one into Photoshop afterwards, so I probably should have saved the original image, but I didn't. So you can't see my like edited settings in Lightroom. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. We didn't end up using this image in the final series art, but I really like the shadows on his face right here and how it like differentiates the two colors. And this one we shot in the studio. We blacked it out, and then we used video lights. They're called quasars. They're like these long tubes. And then we put some like colored gels on top. And we did a red one on this side and a yellow one on this side. And there's so much you can do with like low light, cool photography, and you don't need fancy video lights. There's a photographer that I follow called Brandon Wilful, and he does amazing portraiture, and he uses like string lights and Christmas lights and like little plug-in neon lights from Target with mirrors. And so yeah, just follow cool photographers on Instagram because you'll learn awesome stuff. And then this last one I'm gonna show you guys is a flash photography picture. I always love taking these kinds of pictures when I can at weddings. I think they're so much better than send-offs personally, because you get to get creative and do like a cool backlit shot with like some balloons, or if it's like raining, you can get like some cool silhouettes with like the flash bouncing off the rain. And I would say if you're someone who's like an intermediate to like advanced photographer, buy yourself an off-camera flash and try to learn that. It's off-camera flash, you guys, is like the hardest thing I ever had to learn. But once you learn how to do it, it's so much fun. So, okay, that's all I have. Quincy, go for it.
Oh man. Okay. I will take, oh, I think you have to stop sharing your screen.
Oh yeah.
Most of my photos are live music stuff just because that's for the most part what I do with CCV. So just kind of featuring a few, most of mine are low light. And honestly, like, let's see if I can move this thing. I just kind of work with a lot of the lighting that is given to me because I am always doing low light stuff or live music stuff. And it's just kind of, you don't get to choose the lighting. That's the lighting designer's shop. So I make the most of what I do. A lot of what I end up focusing on is composition, and obviously I think we're going to talk about that next. And so you can kind of see, let's see what lens I was shooting on. I was shooting on my 70-200, so the aperture gets down to 2.8. And so I was kind of just shooting through the crowd, getting a nice blur up until the subject, which is absolutely my favorite thing to do. And you'll see that again in this shot. This shot, it's another editing thing, but I was kind of like, I don't like the colors, so I just threw it in black and white. But really getting that blur before you actually get the subject, that's my favorite thing. And let's see the settings on this one. So I bumped my ISO up Pretty high, honestly. My camera does pretty well in low light situations without getting any grain. There's not too much, mostly in the shadows. And so I can kind of get away with bumping it up. But even when I had a camera that wouldn't, I would still bump it up because I don't mind grain. It gets irritating when you're trying to do portraits pretty much, but I don't think about it too much when I'm doing my music stuff. And then this is the next shot. I went into this shot thinking about having all of this space be black. And so I guess that's just thinking about when you're about to take a photo, what are you looking to get in the end? And I knew I wanted to black out all this other space. So when I threw it into the Lightroom, I ended up pulling the exposure down a lot and messing with those shadows a little bit and the blacks to get the photo right where I want it. And you can see I'm zoomed in full at my 2.8 and still at 5,000 in my eye. So now with this shot, this is one I know we mentioned shutter speed. I actually pulled the shutter speed a little slow on this so I can get some motion blur in him playing guitar. And it's, again, that shallow depth of field. And I was shooting on my 50 millimeter. So I was at f1.4. My 50 goes to 1.2. But sometimes I find that that's a little too much. And so I always bump it up just a little bit just for the photos that I like to get on it. Here's a wide one from Peoria, which like always has killer lighting. But really it was on my 70, so I zoomed in a little bit. But really just accepting that light. Those like light flares are coming from a star filter, which I don't know how much we're going to talk about accessories, but like that's just a fun filter to have because it stretches that light. So you end up seeing, like the light flare out a little bit, and it just adds a little bit to the photo. And then this last one, I kind of, this is one that we might talk about Photoshop a little bit. And I really just combined two photos into Photoshop because I really loved that spotlighting. And then I did like a little motion drag, like a shutter drag, which is a fun little creative thing you can do basically by upping, I think I upped the aperture a little bit. Yeah, I'm all the way up at f25. And yeah, and like 1/5 of a second. So I slowed down my shutter speed a lot and bumped up my aperture and then just basically drugged the camera when I was shooting the photo, and you get this cool effect. And you can do that with portraits, and you can do that with, text like this in a church setting. And then I took the normal photo of that spotted lighting and kind of just combined them and created it almost like this moment was happening, but it wasn't. I just kind of saw the text behind her and wanted something to be happening in that empty space of the photo. But yeah.
That's awesome. Quincy, what camera do you shoot on?
I have a Canon 5D Mark IV.
Okay, cool. I shoot on the Mark III.
Nice.
Cool. I didn't know if you shot mirrorless because you were saying that it has such good ISO.
No, I mean, anything like, I don't know. I am also just like a sucker for grain in general, honestly. And so sometimes I'll just add grain to my photos. So I've never really minded it. I can bump mine up to, what is it, ISO 128,000 or whatever. And there'll be some grain, but I just accept it because low light, I hide my style of editing. I kind of can hide some of that grain in the blacks. So it's not as noticeable.
Oh, I see that she was also asking what kind of camera you use. Yeah. If I were to upgrade, if any of you guys are looking to upgrade to a full frame camera, if you're on a crop sensor like a Rebel or even like I think 60D's crop sensor if you're Canon. Okay, I'm gonna stop right here because I'll get carried away with questions, but we will get back to those. But yeah, I would recommend the Mark IV. It's nice. It has like the touchscreen. You can like put the photos on your phone, edit them there. I can't do that with mine. It's like the next generation below. So
yeah, the Wi-Fi I use all the time to just download them to my phone and do like a quick edit, especially if I just want to like turn over a photo real quick to someone. Like,
yes.
I'll just edit it real quick. It's the best feature, honestly.
Yes, I used to have the Rebel T6. That was like my first camera when I first got started, and like it was not a great camera, but it was good for like getting started, and it was great because I could Wi-Fi connect to my phone, which was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is composition. So this is super important, and especially if you're shooting on a phone, this is something, even if you're not able to shoot in manual, anyone can practice good composition. And so we're going to talk about a couple things in composition. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick again. So when we're thinking about composition, we want to think about things in like the rule of thirds. And this is kind of a rule that it's just a rough guideline and not necessarily something that you have to think about in terms of like very specific actionables. I'm going to show you here. I already showed you guys this image, but this was an image that I took that I was shooting on 35 millimeters, and I really wanted to get those lights up here. So I was like straining really far back with a really heavy flash on, trying to get those like windows in the shot because I really cared about that for some reason. And so it was like a little bit crooked. So I went ahead and just used the like the crop angle tool to like get my lines a little bit more straight. But as you can see, I did kind of crop it in so that the subject was in the middle of the frame. And when we're talking about rule of thirds, we're kind of talking about this zone in like vertical 1, 2, 3, and then we're talking about like top to bottom 1, 2, 3. So those are the things you want to think about. Same thing applies if you're shooting. Let me show you guys this image. If you're shooting like in landscape orientation, I have my subject. This one I don't even think I cropped. I just like the way that I shot it. And personally, I always shoot for getting composition right in camera. You can fix stuff in post, but the less amount of time that you have to spend editing your photos, it's going to make your life so much better, unless you really, 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 really love spending hours at your computer with like bloodshot eyes editing. I don't love doing that, but editing can be fun. Don't get me wrong, but you do want to try to get your composition good in camera as much as possible. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about rule of thirds, but rule of thirds doesn't always have to mean like subject in the middle. I think I kind of like tend towards that. I think especially in a lot of the images that I chose for this, but I like to shoot a lot of times like that, where you have something in like the bottom corner or on that side, for example. I like to do that a lot with, especially with like couples photos for some reason. Like if you have a really nice landscape, you can have your couples like in this bottom corner of the frame, and then like you see all the landscape out here on this side. And so that's really nice. So that's kind of just like a starter with composition. Obviously, there's like a bunch of rules that you can break. And once you learn how to get good at the rules, then you can learn how to pin a way that is helpful. So that's the first part of composition I want to talk about. The other thing that I want to is what we call leading lines. And so this is an example of an image that has like really cool, and I took this for another narrative series that we did called Lexi, and we're doing this in Gabby and Brian Bardzik's house, or their apartment. I don't know if you guys know them. Brian sings for the students worship team, and so does Gabby, actually, his wife. And we were in this series in their apartment, and we were taking like a little snack break, and someone like opened the window a little bit. I was like, wait, I need to get a picture like right now, because I was taking the pictures for the series art, and I just saw this and I was like, I need that. So, and this was actually the final image that we ended up using. We added like a whole other shoot in studio with video lights, and we still like this one better. Basically what I did was I saw these lines with the light, and this was just like there was a blind over on this side, and it was the light was coming through the window onto the wall. And then I just sat her down at the table, and I had her try a couple of different poses. And at the end of the day, I wanted something that felt kind of relaxed, but like a little melancholy. And so I had her just kind of like relax into her hand. And a little trick that I like to do if you're shooting people and you do like an editorial or something a little bit more creative and you want to get some intensity in the shot, I did the same thing with this Tribor's shot. Is I'll have my subject deep breath in and then hold it, and then I'll tell them to exhale. And there's just something about that that's this really like natural intensity. So that's just like a little side tip if you're posing people. But what you can see in this image is the leading line. It's like you have a bunch of lines, And they're not just like point lines. Like you don't want to just put someone in a striped shirt and be like, oh, those are my leading lines. You want your lines to kind of draw your attention to what you want people to look at. And for this, I really wanted people to her expression and really like look into her soul with her eyes. So I took so many pictures of this because I was like, move this way just a little bit, just nope, too much. And so it is kind of like a fine balance when you're doing something crazy like this. But I'm going to show you guys an image that's a good example of leading lines. So this is an image. We were shooting at the Dome, and I was shooting with TJ. We did a couple of cool different things with lines actually with his, but this is my favorite image that I took of him. And I really love, first of all, we have these lines in the ground. And if I was being a little bit picky, I might have actually popped this in Photoshop and like straightened this out a little bit. But I was editing a bunch of images, so I didn't do that. But I love that there's this cutout in the background. And then here we have like the shadow back. And then we also have lines that are coming up this way and framing TJ, who is right in the middle, or, you know, just about. So yeah, and then another thing I really like an image that I wanted to talk about as far as composition is textures. And so you can see there's like a lot of textures here on the walls, and then also in his outfit. And if you have full creative control, like if you're setting up a shoot, obviously like something that Quincy does, she doesn't really have control over a lot of these things. But you have control and you know that you want to do like a really like gritty shoot, you might go to a location like this, or tell the person that you're taking a picture of to wear like a lot of gritty textures, a lot of things that look like they have a lot of like wear to them, like maybe ripped jeans or denim or leather, stuff like that. But maybe you're taking a picture for something you want it to look really luxurious, right? And so think about the concept you're going for. Maybe the textures you want in your image are going to be silk or lace, or maybe like velvet or something like that if you're going for like a more luxurious look. So I always try to think about my textures if I'm doing shoots just for fun, and that's another thing. And then you also kind of want to think about like S-curves, and if you're doing portraiture, like posing. Those are a little bit more advanced, other subjects I'm not going to go into too much. But the main thing when you're posing people is just like give them something to do with their hands and talk to them, really. Make them feel comfortable, give them something to do, tell them to take it in and sigh, or tell a funny joke and get them to laugh. And the main thing is just give them something to do with their hands. Again, this one I told TJ, like pick your crowbar up and like bring it up to your chest, put it back down, and then keep doing that. And then I just took a bunch of pictures and we got this one. So yeah, so that's all I got. Quincy, take it away.
Sweet. Share my screen. Perfect. Yeah, so I kind of already hit on composition, a lot of my shots. That's kind of what I think about when I'm shooting, especially if I'm, you know, ducked away in a crowd. And so sometimes, you know, I'm very much a center. Subject is in the center. I follow the rule of thirds when I'm doing portraits and stuff like that, but for the most part, my content photography is all shot in the center. And so sometimes we'll have it off like this one. And so I just go in and fix that. Honestly, I use the crop tool. The crop tool and I are friends. It's great. There's sometimes I don't use it, obviously. Sometimes I want to square crop. For this one specifically, I know that the guitar player was in the photo, and I didn't really want that, and it would just be even more work to kind of blur that out or get rid of it. And I used the brush tools to mostly do all this black. And so I was like, well, let me try a square crop. And I think it caught the essence pretty well, where he's directly in the center of, if we look at the rule of thirds. So yeah, and then let's see, this one's an interesting crop. I actually, I cropped it 4x5, which is the Instagram crop, but I didn't feel like any of the, oh my goodness, any of the head need to be in it. I, for some reason, cut Fletcher's head off, and just felt like focusing really on the guitar playing, not just the guitar player, and put the guitar at the top where it kind of, the photo kind of leads you into the subject by this blurred focus right here. So I do that a lot with studio stuff and when I'm capturing, you know, behind the scenes of stuff, just because I want to give some context. So this was some musicians in the studio together. And I wanted to capture that. It wasn't just Fletcher playing guitar, it was a group of people in the studio and guiding the music process. And so kind of capturing that by including people, but not really showing who they are. And then another one, I don't know how much I crop this. Yeah, I mostly just crop to either center my subjects or really hone in on a specific area. And yeah, when I'm doing portraits, I do focus on trying to pose people, trying to give them something to do, just because I'll be completely honest, I'm not the best posing person. I'm not great at it. But as I've learned is literally make them do things, make them grab sunglasses, make them play with their hair, or like for boys, I know you can like, I don't know, fold their arms or whatever it is. There's always like silly things you can do. And I've watched a lot of YouTube tutorials on other people posing. So I highly recommend doing that and just like studying as I even know like on TikTok, there's people that teach posing. I'm 100% serious. And I've like sat there and watched some TikToks of people posing and been like, that's an interesting way of doing it. So my thing with shooting is like composition, like think about the shot you want to end up with. And then like, also if you're not good at something, like I'm not good at posing, like spend time looking into it and watching other people do it. I think the best thing we can do is kind of teach each other and like not stop wanting to learn how to do things. So yeah.
Awesome. That's great. Great. So those are like the main principles I talk about today. I wanted to give you guys a little bit of homework before we sign off and just a word of encouragement. So I'm going to share my screen one last time. And encouragement for you guys is to schedule a shoot while we're in quarantine and do it in your house, do it in your backyard, wherever you can do a shoot. And creative. If you want to shoot through the glass in the shower and like, you know, obviously someone with clothes on, but if you want to like get artsy like that and like spray some water on it or like shoot through a window, there, like Quincy said, there's so many good things on TikTok and on YouTube and Instagram. So just do your research and get inspired. Go Pinterest. I love Pinterest. I actually recently did like a self-timer shoot by myself, which felt really awkward, but I did learn a lot doing that about posing and just putting myself in other shoes whenever I'm, you know, taking pictures of other people. But I got in for that shoot from Pinterest and I tweaked a couple things and made it the way I wanted. So get inspired and do a shoot. So the first thing you're going to want to do is set up some inspiration and then kind of put together the pieces that you want. And so I'll show you guys a shoot that I did at home recently. This one I set up by myself. I saw a lot of people that I like doing these like cool mirror selfies and I was like, I'm gonna try that. And I also did one on my phone. I should have uploaded it to my computer so you guys can see it. But I did like a little tutorial on my TikTok and I included like a phone photo in that one so people like you can take cool pictures on your phone too. But this one I just set up like a vintage mirror. I put it on my staircase because I liked again like the leading lines in this and some of that like the handrail here. And then I went ahead and just added some plants and a cool pillow. And then I kind of wanted to keep with this like 60s, like 70s vibe that I had going on. So on like a burnt orange turtleneck and some chunky jewelry. And then I grabbed some string lights. And so that's what these are. They're like the little fairy lights. And those are super fun to play with a photo at a chance. So I did that. And then this one I took on self-timer with a tripod. It's so goofy, but it was fun. And I actually took this in front of my TV. So you can kind of tell there's like a little bit of weirdness going on here. We call that animation. There's not too much of it. It's not too bad. But I took this in front of my TV and then I just got on the Xbox and went on the internet search and just searched for like cotton clouds and then zoomed way in and that's how we got here. So yeah, set up a shoot. You don't have to do it. That's just what I do because I'm so used to taking pictures of people. But if you want to take a picture of your hydro flask or some candles or your baby brother, like literally take pictures of whatever. Cool. And then just my encouragement to you guys is if you're just getting started or even doing this forever, please keep shooting as often as you can. Keep going. You're going to look at your pictures and be like, this is the worst picture ever. Or you're going to be like, this is the best ever. And then 3 years from now, you're going to be like, what did I do? And all of us do that. And my goal is like, every time I take my camera out, I want my pictures to be better than they were the last time I took it out. And so just keep learning, keep shooting, get inspired, try new things. I know something that I've done that's for me is I'm in a group on Instagram, like a DM group, and we all look at each work and like give feedback and encouragement. So if any of you guys in here that are students, like find others that take pictures. And if you're on Instagram, join a DM group together, post your pictures and like ask for, you know, feedback and constructive criticism. And that will really help you guys grow. Cool. All right, we're gonna hop into some Q&A. All right, what camera brand would we suggest using? Quincy, you wanna hop on that first?
I use Canon. I love Canon. I stand by Canon. The colors for me, like always are right on. So I stick to Canon. I honestly think like figure out which one works for you. They all kind of function in different ways. Canon and Nikon are very similar, and there's like Sony, and Sony has great video capabilities. And honestly, Sony is like doing it right now, so I wouldn't like shoot any brand down necessarily. I think just figure out what works, what you want to do.
Yep. Yeah, because once you start like buying more gear, you can it's kind of like iron chains. Like you can't really get out because you spend so much money on stuff. So I would recommend, there's a lot of great websites where you can rent gear, and there's also, you have a friend or an aunt or an uncle who has a camera, just ask them if you can try it out. Some different systems. I think Canon and Nikon are kind of similar, but it kind of depends on the, sometimes I've picked up like an older Nikon camera. I'm like, what is this dinosaur? Yeah. But I like the color tones in Canon. And really like, the biggest thing is shoot on whatever system you're comfortable with. So if you've already been shooting in, my personal opinion is like, I'd rather keep shooting on Canon because I'm going to take better pictures with my Canon camera than I would with a Nikon camera, because it's going to be 2 months just to learn how to take the same pictures on that camera. So that's what I think.
I would also add, like, don't let gear hold you back at all. Obviously, we're editing in Lightroom, and we have Lightroom and Photoshop, and all the programs, but I honestly edit on VSCO all the time. I love it for anything I do on social media, specifically like stories and like creative stuff like that. I just throw a photo in VSCO. It edits raw photos. So one thing we didn't really talk about is RAW, shooting in camera RAW, which allows you more editing capabilities. But edit on your phone, edit in VSCO, After Life Amazing. There's so many good photo editing apps on your phone that you can use. And so like if you're having a photo in front of you and you're like, I can't edit this on my computer, or my camera didn't quite capture correctly, edit it, and throw it on your phone. Like there's so many easy ways to edit on there.
Yeah, for sure. Totally. Yeah, I put it on my notes to add camera to my list, and I didn't add it to my list. So sorry, guys. If you shoot on a camera, you should be shooting in RAW. It's not going to change the way that you shoot really at all. If you're able to edit in Lightroom and Photoshop, like do that, especially if you have and you can get on board with like the journalism or the yearbook group, and you can have like a student account. Definitely take advantage of that. And you know, Adobe Suite is so good. But yeah, if you can shoot in RAW, because you're have more capabilities with editing. But if you can't shoot in RAW, you're shooting on your phone, you want to edit in VSCO, like I started editing in VSCO and shooting on a Canon Rebel. So you really can do so much. And honestly, the iPhone 11 takes better pictures than entry-level cameras right now.
Yeah. And some iPhone apps you can shoot in RAW. I think VSCO might, but I know, I think there's a Moment app that shoots in RAW, and like it'll just shoot in RAW on your phone so you can edit it more. The Lightroom mobile app is like also one of my best friends, and that shoots in RAW. So if you can't shoot in RAW on your phone, or you don't know how to work with RAW files, like you can also do it on your phone or on your camera, sorry. And then you can also do it on your phone, and it gives you all the editing capabilities. So
yeah,
figure out where you're comfortable, and then like kind of go work with what you have and what you can do, and then build up.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I like Visco. There's so many good apps out there. I feel like if you look at also like some Instagram influencers, they probably have better tips than I would for taking phone pictures. But also I was going to mention Lightroom on your phone. There is a free version because my husband uses that on his, so he could log into my account, but then he have like all my photos in there. He probably doesn't want that. So he just uses the free version. So there is a free version of Lightroom for your phone. I would recommend that. And yeah, I think that was all I was going to say about that. Oh no, you guys found me on back. Thanks, Bar. Please be nice. I'm still learning how to use it. I'm like 25, but I feel like I don't know what I'm doing.
Same. I get on and I'm like, I'm just gonna watch videos for a little.
I'm like trying to do it. I don't know. Gary Vaynerchuk like, get on TikTok. I'm like, okay. Yeah. Cool. Do you guys have any other questions? I'd love to hear like what you guys are shooting, if you're new, if you're just learning, or if you've been shooting for a while. Oh, it says Quincy does haze affect your shooting. I didn't see that one.
Sometimes haze is a pain. CCV hasn't done like super heavy haze, and so it's never really been a huge issue. I've done concerts where there's like giant clouds of haze, and so it can be a pain, but you can also get really cool shots of like the artist popping out from like a cloud of haze. And so I wouldn't say it like affects it negatively when I have it. I think it just gives me another thing to work around. And as someone who's constantly shooting in low light or changing light, kind of used to just random obstacles constantly happening. So sometimes it affects it, but not negatively.
For sure. Yeah, I think like when you're shooting anything that's concert or documentary style or even wedding, a lot of times you really don't have control over the environment, which is why it's like so important to learn how to shoot in manual exposure when you can, because that's just be a game changer. But yeah, there's also like, I know in Lightroom I use like there's like a dehaze little meter, and so you can pull that down. It can be really helpful.
Yeah, I've used that a couple times to just like actually get my subject out of a bunch of cloud of smoke.
Yeah, I use that even like sometimes in Arizona when you're shooting in golden hour, you get a lot of haze because if you're in the desert, it's like dust and a lot of sun flares, and so you can kind of get to where you're like, did my subject go, and you want to bring some of that sharpness back, so you can do dehaze for that. What are the coolest places to shoot portraits in Arizona? Been shooting for a few years in new places. That's a great question.
Yeah.
I personally prefer a lot of places that are kind of off the beaten path. You know, there's always like Superstitions in Sonora and Preserve in Scottsdale, which are like iconic spots, and that for a reason, for sure. But you also sometimes, especially during like family Christmas card season, deal with like a swarm of other photographers that you're like, I personally feel like it makes the people I'm taking pictures of feel a little uncomfortable because it's like paparazzi. So I actually like shooting. I live in the West Valley, so whenever I can, I like to take capture. And I find that there's certain spots in like the Thunderbird Reserve that are less populated. And what are things that are in Surprise? Quincy, do you know what I'm talking about? Why am I blanking? White tanks. White tanks. I like white tanks. And then Anthem has like, if you're looking for a desert spot, Anthem has the Daisy Mountain Trail, which is a little bit hard to find, but if you look on like the hiking trails apps and stuff, you can find it because it's in like a little neighborhood. And every time I go there, I'm the only photographer there. There's maybe one or two hikers, and it's awesome. It's not like any magnificent mountains or anything. It's really is like a landscape, but I really love that spot. I'm thinking of like more interesting spots. Let me look. I'm gonna look on my Google Maps because I am Quincy. If you have any spots, feel free to chime in.
I'm so bad because I'm not new to Phoenix anymore. I can't make that excuse, but I'm still learning a lot of the places to do photos. One of my favorite spots is Scottsdale Civic Center, which is just like green and full of plants and white walls. And so I've done like a couple of sessions there, it has a lot of different backgrounds, and so you can kind of go to one location and get a ton of different photos. Other than that, I've done Super Sessions, it's always beautiful. I've done Papago a couple times. I don't know where else. I just kind of pick a place and I'm like, that will make it work.
The app updated and now I don't know. I promise I'm not a grandma. I'll figure it out later. But yeah, there's the good spots. And I would say too, just like get creative. And if you, maybe not for portraits, but if you're looking to just like better your craft, take pictures in weird, ugly places. That's my biggest tip. I did a couple of shoots in like Home Depot and I was really scared I was going to get kicked out, but I didn't get kicked out. But in like shooting in really industrial locations or really like not cute spots is super helpful to just get creative.
One of my favorite things to do is to go out, like especially downtown for me, just because I only live like 10 minutes from downtown, 15 minutes. So I go downtown, like pick a parking garage and just like walk around the parking garage and then just like walk around the areas around it and just shoot it. It gives a really modern, like urban vibe. And then there's also like walls of plants downtown, certain buildings and stuff.
Yeah.
So you can get a ton of different things. And I just take like 1 or 2 friends with me. And
yeah, downtown's a really good spot. There's like that wall with like birds painted on it, which is really cool. I really love that spot. There's so many good like murals down there. And like Old Town Scottsdale can be fun too. A lot of different options there if you want like a lot of different looks. And the fair, if you get the chance to go take the fair. The only thing is if people are paying you, there's like a lot of Facebook groups that you can check into on if you're on Facebook for like photographers. And if you can join those, a lot of people will post if certain locations require a permit or not. And so you do want to look into that because if you're getting paid for if you're not getting paid, I don't think it's a deal. But if you're getting paid for something and the park ranger comes around, especially in Scottsdale, and you don't have a permit, they will fine you like $200. So just don't do that. Northern Arizona spots. I really like walking Prescott or downtown Prescott. Sedona, there's so many spots in Sedona. Airport Lookout is one of my favorites, although it does get really crowded. Cathedral Rock's really.
I like the aspen trees in Flagstaff.
Yeah. I haven't done any sessions there, but I have hiked there.
Yeah, they're really pretty.
Yeah, there's a couple of good, really honestly, not as many as I would hope, but there are some good posts on different photo spots. So I would Google that. And what I always do is whenever I go to a new place or I drive past a place and I'm like, oh, that looks like I want to take pictures, then I'll save it in my Google Maps. So yeah. Cool. Quincy, I have to sign off, so
yep.
Feel free.
All right. Well, thanks
for joining us. Yeah, I'll answer a couple more questions and then we'll wrap up. Cool.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Thanks, Quincy. You too. Cool. Thanks, Bo. Someone says, when's the next meeting? I don't know. We were just planning on doing one. We didn't know if people would even be in. So I don't know. If you guys want another one, let us know in like the DM Instagram for the CCV students account and we might do another one. All right, cool. I'm going to give you guys 1 more minute if you have any questions. If not, then we'll say toodles. Cool. All right, thanks for joining me. I hope that you learned something from this and hopefully we'll see you soon and have lunch. Bye.